Hi, and welcome to my talk through of the first chapter of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey. In this, I'm basically just walking through how I'm thinking about the reading as I'm approaching it. This is probably the fifth or sixth time I've read this book, and I'm going to be highlighting some of the things that stick out to me as I go through this, some of the things that I'm thinking about, and some of the themes that are going to be important as we're talking about this novel. I love the way it opens. Just that simple sentence, they're out there, right? It immediately begins this us versus them mentality. We set out not knowing who it is, but knowing that they are against us, right? Whoever the narrator is. And then we get into the description of who he calls the black boys, the orderlies of this psych ward. And he immediately points out that they are black boys in white suits. Whenever I see a black and white contrasted against each other like that, I'm thinking in terms not only of the color contrast, but of that kind of black and white contrast in our view of the world. So is this someone that sees things in very kind of black and white, cut and dry ways? Is he thinking about those kind of diametric oppositions? That's something I'm thinking about. And then the whole first line is just designed for shock, right? So we have these boys up before me to commit sex acts in the hall and get it mopped up before I can catch them. I'm really, even at this beginning, even before I know who our narrator really is, thinking, is this literal? It seems like it can't be literal. But then again, we're coming into this place where the things that we expect to happen are not the things that happen. And the things that may shock and disgust us are going to be kind of par for the course in this world that's created from Chief Bromden's view in the hospital. He introduces this theme of hate, and that's going to come back over and over and over again with Nurse Ratched and with all of her kind of underlings in this ward. And he says, when they hate like this, it's better if they don't see me. Introducing that theme of invisibility that he comes back to all over and over throughout this first chapter and throughout the novel. Chief Bromden is a huge guy, but he thinks of himself as very small and tries often to be invisible. We also get this idea already on the first page about the special sensitive equipment that detects his fear. So he also sees things in terms of machinery, that this is not just a bunch of individuals, but it's a well-oiled machine, and it's a machine that is designed to work against him and against the other patients in the hospital. We see a world here where cruelty is the norm. The orderlies are making fun of him. They are swatting the backs of his legs, and this is just something that happens every day. On the next page, we get that hum of black machinery humming hate and death and other hospital secrets. So this connection between the machinery and the secrets. And we find out that nobody even cares about whatever they say around our narrator because they think that he's deaf and dumb. But he's not, right? Just by saying they think I'm deaf and dumb, he's revealing that all of this is an act. We find out that he is half Indian, so he has this kind of indigenous culture as a part of who he is. And he says that it helps him be cagey, so sneaky, and he says that this helps him fly under the radar, right? But he understands everything that's going on. We have the connection between the big nurse and the lockworks, right? So again, that machine, that kind of robotic nature here. She's been around lock so long. We see Nurse Ratched portrayed as this archetype of a woman, right? She's cold. She is this Gorgon figure where she's this devouring monster, and we get that through the language of this text. I love the imagery of her lips and her fingers that are funny orange, like the tip of a soldering iron. Color so hot or so cold, if she touches you with it, you can't tell which. So we've got all this characterization of Nurse Ratched on this first page. The second page. This is her introduction here, and again, he's got all this mention of wheels and gears, cogs, forceps, pliers, all these things that are part of the machine that he sees as the working of the hospital. And we also see that he thinks he has some defense mechanisms against that, right? Like he says he can foul up the machine by not letting her see his eyes. They can't tell so much about you if you got your eyes closed. So even though he does see it as very machine-like, there's also this personal connection to it, right? That if he hides his humanity, he can't become a part of the machine. On the 5th page here, we see the nurse as a predator, a monster, a robot. And when she sees her orderlies misbehaving or not working, right, Chief Bromden sees her go off on them. That's what's happening here. But when he sees it happening, he sees it in terms of this image of the machine, right? He really sees her as like exploding into almost a transformer, right? She's got robot arms and he can smell the machinery inside of her. And he says the hate has built up too high and overloaded and they're going to tear one another to pieces. So he sees this interaction that to anybody else would just look like a boss telling off her workers. But to him, he sees it as this monstrous predatory affair. This is his perception. And his familiarity with this suggests that he's seen this play out many, many times before, right? On the next page, we have more characterization of Nurse Ratched. She is just wild, right? Like the way that she's described, we've got the contrast here of the machine-like imagery with this description of her as an expensive baby doll, skin like flesh-covered enamel, blend of white and cream and baby blue eyes, everything working together except the color of her lips and her fingernails, and these little details that are more womanly about her and then contrast with the hardness of who she is. We also get the first mention of the Combine in this part, and the Combine is going to be an image he comes back to over and over again as a piece of machinery that's basically threshing out all of the patients in the ward. We have a terrifying image of what happens according to his perception when they come and shave the patients before breakfast. And then we as we're at the bottom of page 6, we have this phrase here where he says, like always, when I try to place my thoughts in the past and hide there, the fear close at hand seeps in through the memory. So we're going to get on this next page this really interesting time jumpy kind of thing where whenever Chief Bromden is scared, he retreats into the past, and the past and the present begin to merge together for him. So he'll have flashbacks of his childhood, growing up on a reservation, of a war. He was a veteran in World War II. And this is something that's triggered for him by fear. He also, the author also incorporates some more of that kind of animalistic language. We've got this predator versus prey set up here as the past and present continue to collide in Bromden's view of time. So we have this story of the bird and then the blue tick hound baying in the fog. And all of this is, you just have to keep in mind also that he is a World War II veteran. He's seen a lot of things. A lot of this is PTSD. So when that he's getting shaved and they get near his temples and he says it's not a willpower thing anymore, it's a button push, says air raid, air raid. It's a trigger, right? It's his PTSD kicking in and making him just lose control. He doesn't know how to deal with it, and he doesn't have those tools. At the end of this scene where the fog machine comes in and his perception is starting to blur overall, and he had this image of the orderlies holding him down while the nurse jams her wicker bag and all into my mouth and shoves it down with a mop handle. I don't know what's happening here. Like, what's actually happening? That's not what's going on, right? Because above all else, Nurse Ratched is the ultimate professional. So none of this is happening, but this is his perception, right? So if she's not jamming her entire bag down his throat, what is she doing? How is she suffocating him? And then at the end of this chapter, we have, him experiencing this trauma. The they're trying to subdue him. And he says at the top of page 8, it's going to burn me just that way, finally telling about all this, about the hospital, about her and the guys, and about McMurphy. I've been silent so long, it's going to roar out of me like floodwaters. And you think the guy telling this is ranting and raving, my God. You think this is too horrible to have really happened. This is too awful to be the truth. But please, it's still hard for me to have a clear mind thinking on it. But it's the truth, even if it didn't happen. And I love that last line because it really captures everything about Chief Bromden to me. It's the truth, even if it didn't happen. Even if it didn't happen exactly the way he perceives it, this is his essence of truth, right? He sees the truth that's going on, the hate that's going on, the manipulation that's going on under the veneer of perfection that exists in this psychiatric facility. And this is also our big reveal. This is the end of the first chapter, and we discovered that this is a frame story. So whatever is happening in this first chapter is happening after all the events that we're about to get in the main part of the story. This is him remembering something that happened long ago. Well, we don't know how long ago, but it happened a while ago. And it also introduces this major theme that truth is subjective. And what does truth mean? And is truth more about essence than what we perceive? There's so many questions about truth here. And that's all I have. That's what I want to talk. That's how I'm thinking about this first chapter. As I go on, I'm going to be looking for some of the repetition of the same things, looking for the language about machinery, looking for Chief Bromden and the fog and how he sees himself in terms of, and how he sees everything that's happening in terms of time, in terms of size, right? Who is big in this novel and who is small, according to him, and what makes them that way. Those are all the things that I'm going to look for, and I look forward to talking about it with you.